Coming up on Naked Age, how a man with no law degree wrote the legal briefs for the case that won top-free equality in the state of New York.
Now the attorneys were coming out of the woodwork. Can we take your case? Can we take your case? The top lawyer for ACLU in Rochester took some of the women, and a top society lawyer from New York City took some of the women. But they used my briefs. Changed them a little bit, but I was very honored. We won unanimously.
Coming up right now on Naked Age. Stick around.
This episode of Naked Age is supported by a sponsorship grant from the American Association for Nude Recreation Education Foundation. Learn more about the Anner Education Foundation and their mission, or make a donation at aanr-ef.com.
Welcome to Naked Age, a nudist history series exploring uncommon stories and profiling unique people who have gone to extraordinary lengths to live a nude life. I'm your host, Evan Nix. In this episode, we meet Morley Schloss, a man whose journeys and work in body freedom challenged the status quo and shaped culture. This is Naked Age.
You're listening to Naked Age.
Morley Schloss is well known in naturist circles as the owner of Sunsport Gardens Naturist Resort in South Florida. His impact on the nudism movement, however, is much more significant, but his influence extends beyond just nudism. Morley's tales often involve bold actions in areas like nudism, topfreedom, anti-war protests, and advocacy. Perhaps most notably, Morley played a crucial role in a 1992 legal victory affirming top freedom for women in New York. Thanks to this, it's legal for anyone to go topless in public in New York State. Morley discovered naturism at Woodstock in 1969. He soon founded Naturist Rochester, collaborated with Lee Baxendall of the Naturist Society, and led the Eastern Sunbathing Association. He was active in top-free advocacy, free beach activism, and even ran for Congress once as an anti-Vietnam candidate. Over the years, his efforts have earned him dozens of headlines in the press, both nudist and mainstream. In this episode of Naked Age, we'll hear Morley's story, focusing on his work and influence. Now, usually I provide a detailed introduction for these episodes with historical context and clips, but Morley's story is so varied and his impact is so broad that I think instead we will just let his stories unfold in his own words. Recently, I was lucky to sit down with Morley over Zoom from his home at Sunsport Gardens in Loxahatchee Grove, Florida, to hear his story firsthand. Can you tell me about your life before naturism?
I can tell you that. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, lived in East Cleveland, and then I moved to Shaker Heights, which is a suburb. In high school, I had a column in the high school newspaper. I was business manager of the yearbook. I was on a debating team. I went to Harvard, and I got an undergraduate degree there. I majored in government my first 3 years and then switched to social relations, which is a really fun major. And then a master's degree in education at Tufts, and then I got a job in Rochester, New York. And I taught school, I taught in all different places. I founded a progressive school myself, kind of based on Summerhill, which is a very popular book back then. The kids had a lot of freedom and choice, and we play guitar and play auto harp and developed a songbook, actually. One time, Peter Yarrow, Peter, Paul, and Mary came and joined us one morning. It was during the Vietnam War days. I was very active in the anti-war movement in Rochester, organized events, protests, was arrested, blocked traffic for an hour, all kinds of different. I ran for Congress. It was a peace thing. Both the Republican and Democrat supported the war. So I ran so that I'd have a voice, that I got to speak at colleges and in churches and on television. And it was an educational candidacy.
Sure, sort of strategic, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And it worked well. I was a pretty good organizer. I could get up and think about what I was going to say on my way up to a podium and really get people interested. I was kind of an expert on the war. I knew what was going on. And actually, I was editor of something called the Rochester Peace newsletter. In that part of my life, I was very active as a leader in Rochester in the anti-war movement. About that time, in 1969, in August, I didn't know Woodstock was happening till I heard about it on television or the radio.
There were 450,000 young people here, an instant big city, really, with no conveniences, few police, but no violence, not even arguments in the midst of a 12-hour traffic jam. It's true, one may not ask for the names of the tailors of these youngsters, but would anyone care to venture a guess about what would have happened if 450,000 well-dressed businessmen were thrown together for 3 days under similar circumstances? This is Gregory Jackson, ABC News, in Bethel, New York.
At that time, I had a 2-year-old and a 1-month-old. The 1-month-old had been born on July 4th. So we piled into a car and said, we're going to go there. Well, we couldn't get all the way because there's traffic jams and there was no place to park, so we just pulled off the side of the road about a mile from Woodstock. A truck came by and we jumped in the back of it. And we had a tent with us. Because I had a 1-month-old, they let us set up our tent behind the stage with the performers. Didn't really get to know anybody, but we walk out in front of the stage because we were right there.
The sponsors said it was going to be 3 days of peace and music. It was that all right, and much more. That and the rainstorms that turned the big dairy meadow into a mud farm.
It wasn't just a musical event, it was a social event, it was a cultural event. And it had been raining, the whole hillside was muddy. And of course I got covered in mud just sitting there. And there was a pond behind the stage. Now I hadn't done any skinny dipping before. This is kind of what got me into naturism. I went behind the stage and didn't have a bathing suit with me. Took off my clothes, went in the water. I was kind of scared because it was a new thing to me. And I went in the water, and it was such an amazing feeling of freedom, of feeling the water all over me when I got out, the sunshine, the air all around me, over my whole body. This is an amazing feeling. So I was hooked right then after getting out of the water at Woodstock.
So clearly it spun you and your life in some new direction on some level.
Oh, it changed my life. I mean, yes, Woodstock was very, very important. Anyway, I had been turned on some. I went to the public library and looked up nudist resorts, found them and started visiting them that year. I think I visited about 4 nudist resorts that same year, in 1969. Some of them still exist. I started looking at spots where you could be nude around Rochester. At one of the resorts, I got a copy of the Free Beach Documentation Center newspaper. It was a tabloid one that Lee Baxendall put out. This is before the Nature Society began, so it was the 1970s sometime. And so I wrote to him and we started corresponding because he wanted to know about nude beaches in the area around upstate New York. So that's how I got in touch with Lee Baxendall, the star who developed a real friendship with him.
How did you go from that to establishing your first nudist group, Naturist Rochester?
I didn't like Rochester winters. They were cold, horrible, and so I decided I'd visit nudist parks, including one in Canada, just on the other side of the Peace Bridge from Buffalo, called Lily Valley. A German couple ran it, and they had really good food, or not the kind of food I'd eat now, but it was tasted good then, good German cooking. And they had a sauna, pool, and a little outside area. And the pool was indoors. That was, I would drive over an hour to get there, across the Peace Bridge. So I decided, well, I'm going to try something. So I had this nice house in Rochester, and I put an above-ground pool in the basement.
Oh, an above-ground pool.
You had to duck your head to get out over the side so you didn't hit the ceiling. It also started rusting. So I said, well, I wondered about putting an in-ground pool in my basement. So I had an architectural friend, an architectural engineer, who told me how close to the walls I could get without collapsing the house. And I dug down. Fortunately, the house had been built over a landfill. So digging down, it was before there was any plastics or anything, so there was no dangerous stuff on there. I found a lot of shoe leather, old hand-blown bottles, bricks, pieces of coal, but it was fairly easy digging. But I dug down about 4 feet, and then I had a conveyor belt to take the dirt through a basement window up to a truck outside.
I pictured like a jailbreak scene with wheelbarrows up the stairs or something like that.
A little more advanced than that. We actually went through a basement window with a conveyor belt to a truck outside, which made it a little easier.
How long did that take?
Several months, I don't know exactly. It wasn't a week job, it was several months to actually dig that down. And I had to break up the basement floor first with a sledgehammer. Then I built a sauna, built it myself, figured out how to do it. I made it so I could put 2 oven heating elements inside this box. Built benches, built a room, learned how to frame in a room. So built a sauna, and then a little later a hot tub. So now I had an in-ground pool and a hot tub and a sauna in my all in my basement. And I invited friends over.
I'm curious a little more about Naturist Rochester. You had people coming and going from your house? Is
that
how it worked?
Oh, yeah. That was the headquarters of Naturist, my basement. That was it. That was Naturist Rochester.
Did they have to make reservations, or were people free to come and go?
Well, it kind of started gradually with just friends coming over, people we knew. And then, I'm not sure exactly the dates when we first became associated with national organizations, but then it became more official. We became more and more organized gradually, but it wasn't like all of a sudden, now we have Naturist Rochester. It evolved. It was an evolution.
How long did it persist for? Was it
because it's still there?
Found it written about.
No, it's still there.
Wow.
I don't live in Rochester, but it's there in the same house. I jump way, way forward. I'm living in Florida now full time, and I own this house up in Rochester, New York, and I dreaded having to take it apart, take all my stuff out, clean it up. And I was paying taxes on it and insurance on it. 2 of my kids were born at home in the house, not in the hospital, with midwives, home births. Now my son, my youngest, had moved to California. He was living first in San Francisco and then Oakland. He said, I want to go back to Rochester. I have a lot of friends there. So I gave him the house. It was wonderful. He remodeled it so it's much nicer, but since he got it basically for free or for $1 or something, he had funds and he really did beautiful stuff with the house. There's still the pool in the basement. The naturist group comes over. They have a regular schedule on. They don't just drop in. They still use that pool that I built. So Naturist Rochester still exists without me. And that's kind of an honor to have somebody who really put it together. I'm in Florida, and the organization's still going. It's one of the oldest non-landed clubs in the country. So it still exists.
Wow. And was it through Naturist Rochester essentially that you became involved with the Eastern Sunbathing Association?
We were a chapter of it, so I'd go to an ASA convention. I went to Nature Society events, and Mary Lou, my wife, actually was elected trustee of the National ASA from the Eastern region. I remember going to a convention in Pennsylvania, and I didn't like a lot about ASA then. So I made a motion that ASA membership would be open to everybody, regardless of, and I had the whole long list: race, religion, age, and I threw in sexual orientation. That blew their minds. You couldn't have same-sex couples in ASA back then. You had a man and a woman. Anyway, I made this motion. It was defeated, did not pass, but at one of the conventions I actually made a motion to open it up. And the guy who was president of ESA was a guy who had a club in northern Florida, and on the gate to his club it said, "N***s and hippies not welcome." He was president of ESA, and that's what he had on his gate. Well, I and some other people had real problems with that, obviously. So I was together with a slate. We ran against him. We got proxies from different clubs around, and we won. We threw him out. I was originally vice president, but the president resigned in about a month, and I became president of ESA. Well, the first referendum we had was back then, many, maybe even most ASA clubs back then had things called royalty pageants. They looked like beauty pageants. There were kings and queens and princes and princesses and all that. But the main people who got attention were the queens and princesses. And at the end of each one, they'd have a photo shoot with all these men taking photos of all these women who were supposedly representative, but they only had certain body types, so they wouldn't have been up there. Because they were counterproductive. We talk about body acceptance, and here you have these images of these people on the cover of the tabloid, the ASA bulletin. So we had this referendum. We defeated them, yay! We got rid of royalty pageants in the ESA, and later it was nationally.
It sounds like you brought sort of a progressive vision to the
I
ESA.
definitely brought a progressive vision, and gradually it's taken hold. Until there was a backlash, and some of the clubs got together, didn't like what we were doing. We had a convention, and we instituted mail ballot where everybody could vote. And we trusted everybody. You just send in your vote. Well, at this time, some of the big clubs in Florida who had supported me and supported the progressive movement said, you're going too far. The clubs aren't going to have their power anymore. So the three biggest clubs in Florida at the time, Cypress Cove, Paradise Lakes, and Lake Como, all printed up ballots and handed them to people pre-marked when they were coming into their clubs, collected them, and sent the ballots in. So the three big clubs in Florida got together, and they defeated us young people who were really poor. I mean, we had other things, like we didn't want any smoking in any of the buildings where the conventions were held. Radical things like that. And all the things we were doing were radical, and not radical at all now, but they were progressive at the time. I had been elected at an ESA meeting as president of ESA, which I was for a year, until I got voted out. Anyway, when we got to convention, when my wife was trustee, the president at the time, a woman named Julie Erlenmeyer, came up to us and said, "Now, I don't want any of this top-free nonsense here." That was back then. And it's not like that now, but that was back then. It was quite conservative.
So your wife, Mary Lou, was she already an activist at this point, or?
No, but she became one. And I'll tell you how that happened. She was into naturism right away. I mean, our whole house, everybody knew we were into naturism. We had our basement then, and people would come over to use it. A friend of ours named Ramona Santarelli was sunning topfree at a park connected to a museum in Rochester. The guard comes over to her and said, "Put on your top." And she points out, "These people don't have their tops on," pointing the men around. "You're a woman, put your top on." Well, she did not like that, obviously. She immediately came over to our house and said, we got to do something about this. She knew some other women, and we had a meeting at my house in Rochester. And now a number of the women were involved were lesbians. Well, my wife wasn't at that point, but she was nursing. She's a nursing mother, and she didn't like the thing of having to wear tops. And so she got in with this group. And they decided we're going to have a picnic in a park. This is 1986. And we went together. We made some mistakes by announcing it way ahead of time and getting a lot of publicity, which we shouldn't have had. Because we had this picnic, and this whole bunch of guys with beer cans stood around the edge of it watching our picnic. And we had all the media there, and there were arrests, and 7 women were arrested, including Mary Lou and 6 other women. And I was heavily involved in it then. So we had a very interesting thing. They were arrested for exposure of a person. It was a violation. It was not a misdemeanor, not a felony, a violation, like a parking ticket or something, that level of offense. But we challenged it, said we're going to fight this. We went to court. Fortunately, we got a good judge who, for a violation, allowed a 5-day trial. Nobody in history's probably had a 5-day trial for a violation, but we did. And so we were going to win. I had gone into the law library downtown in Rochester at the Hall of Justice and done all kind of research. And I basically wrote the briefs that we used in court. And went through the law library, real thick books. And there's something called shepherdizing. This case leads to this case, leads to this case. And put together a really strong thing. We flew with 3 really good expert witnesses. Lee Baxendall came and testified because he was supporting us. He was one of our expert witnesses. But the 3 interesting ones, there was a woman who came in who was a sociologist, brought Barbie doll. And this was back when there was only one Barbie doll. There was no diversity in Barbie dolls back then. She introduced Barbie doll as evidence and said, this doll has unattainable dimensions. If a woman really looked like this, she'd topple over and be anorexic. She said, this is not the image that people should have, that kids should have growing up playing. And when they don't see what women really look like, that's the image they're going to get. Then we had a woman named Marilyn Story come in from the University of Northern Iowa, who had written and done studies about the benefits of growing up in a nudist family and how kids had better self-concepts and things when they grew up being exposed to nudity and being nude. Then we had a real powerful image, another witness. She was from the Margaret Mead Institute in Connecticut. We flew her in. This was a violation. We flew her in, and she testified on the benefits of breastfeeding. It was well timed because the Surgeon General of the United States had just come out with a paper on the benefits of breastfeeding. And she said, now women are not going to be comfortable breastfeeding in public if the only time they can have their breasts out is when they're breastfeeding. Their breasts need to be normalized. We had those 3 witnesses, and we won in the district court, at the lower court. But we won not on the grounds we wanted to win, and we won not on equality, we won on free speech. They were right to have this demonstration in the park if they wanted. We didn't want to run on free speech. We didn't want to have women have to hold up signs to take their shirts off.
Right.
So, but we won. The county appealed, and we lost at the county level. And we would not allow any attorney after that first year to even introduce free speech. We didn't even want that brought up as an option. Then we had picnics every year. In 1989, we had the next arrest on a beach on Lake Ontario. that was a very interesting time, too. We had another interesting time in court. Again, I wrote the briefs for it. And, by the way, Mary Lou went pro se. That means she didn't have an attorney. But the other women did. You never want to go to court without an attorney. So the other women had a public defender who could raise objections and things and make sure things went right. But we did all the work as far as preparing witnesses and cross-examining them and things. Or I didn't, Mary Lou did. There's a magazine called Sports Illustrated. They had a swimsuit edition. We blew up big photos from that. The law in New York State said you could not show any part of a woman's breast below the top of the areola. Every one of these bathing suits in. So they called the cops who had done the arrests in, one at a time, and they didn't know what to do. Would you arrest this woman? Well, I guess I have to. No, I don't think I would. The cops contradicted each other. They had no plan. They didn't know whether to arrest a woman with this kind of bathing suit or not. But they were popular bathing suits, and they all broke the law in New York State. Then the other thing we did, and this was really lucky, one of the TV stations filmed the arrests being taken at the beach with cops taking bare-chested women under arrest. They showed that on the 6 o'clock news. So I called the station manager and I said, did you have any complaints because you had women on the news without tops on? No. Did anyone call in complaining? No. Did you get any letters complaining? Would you ever get complaints on what's on the news? Oh, all the time. Anytime we deal with gay rights, we get issues. But you didn't get one single one? No. So I had a friendly subpoena of the station manager. He came in and testified to that nobody objected on the 6 o'clock news. So that was helpful. But anyway, we lost in that local court, even in spite of all that. We had a horrible judge. He ruled based on Judeo-Christian tradition. He wrote that in his, that couldn't hold up on appeal. No judge can put in a violation of religion as a reason for ruling against us. So we went to the next county court level. We won. We got a good judge, feminist judge, and we won on the equal protection grounds. So we now had a split decision at the county level, a win and a loss. So it went to the top court of the state, which in New York State is not called Supreme Court, it's called Court of Appeals in New York State. We had a hard time getting attorneys before then. Pro se, public defender. Now the attorneys were coming out of the woodwork. Can we take your case? Can we take your case? The top lawyer for ACLU in Rochester took some of the women, and another one, I think my wife, and another, and then a top society lawyer from New York City named Harold Price Farringer, who argued before the top court before, took some of the women, but they used my briefs. They changed them a little bit, but I was very honored because they mostly used what I'd written. And we won unanimously. And so in July of 1992, it took that long, July of 1992, from that time on, women can be top-free in New York State anytime, anywhere men can be. And since it's a constitutional thing, no county or town can go against it. No town in New York State can require women to wear tops where men don't need to. A grocery store can require tops for everybody, but you can't discriminate.
Do you happen to remember where the name, the Rochester Top Free 7, came from?
Yeah, we created that back in 1986. There were 7 women, and they used the term top free. None of them would respond to topless, which was the common thing. He said, topless gives the wrong idea. It's what you see on signs outside of bars for entertaining men. So during the trials, the women had come up with the term top free, meaning freedom. That's all we deal with. The women wouldn't respond to anything else in the trials. So that's how the term top freedom got started.
I feel like this ties to your strategizing in a lot of ways. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. Although I will not claim that I made up the term top free. The women did. I wrote the briefs. The women were the ones who put themselves on the line, not me. This was their things. I was not arrested then. My part was mainly arranging logistics and writing briefs. I never spoke in court. They're the ones who put themselves on the line. They're the ones who deserve all the credit. We happened to be invited to the Donahue show.
Ramona Santarelli is here, and Mary Lou Schloss. They were with us in 1986. The cops came in. We got the tape of the arrest. Boy, these cops came in, arrested them. They beat it in court. The court said, hey, a man is a man, a woman is a woman. From the waist up, what's the difference?
But the whole city school district stopped in most of the buildings and watched Donahue with me on it. I was teaching school, and I was a school administrator in Rochester, New York. Here's a local guy, one of the school district people, who was going to be on the Donahue show.
We've had 5 picnics since the one you showed in Rochester, New York. And every single one, it's been peaceful. There have been no complaints. There's been no crowd since the first one. So people are not offended.
So they all watched it. But I never got any hassle being the spokesperson for Naturist Rochester or for being in the head papers all the time with the topfreedom, and I had columns about it and things like that. Never had any hassle from the Rochester City School District.
So you guys fought this whole legal battle for like 6 years, and you won such a victorious win in 1992.
Yeah.
I also read that you engaged in this Peace Bridge protest around that time.
Okay, good. Okay, that's
did that kind of follow on the heels. Were you like amped from the success?
There's a woman named Gwen Jacobs who had been arrested.
Gwen Jacobs was a Canadian activist who made headlines in 1991 when she challenged the law in Ontario against women going topless in public by walking shirtless near the Peace Bridge, which connects Ontario with Buffalo, New York, over the U.S. border.
It was a real hot day there. She'd taken off her shirt to walk back. She was arrested. Now it's legal in Ontario, but it wasn't then. And that caused a whole bunch of, she had a lot of support, including from Naturist Rochester, who were right across the bridge. So a bunch of us put shirts on, joined in exercise. We walked back across the Peace Bridge. In the center of the Peace Bridge were the flags marking which part is Canada and which part is the United States. We all took off our shirts, women and men, when we got under those flags in the middle of the Peace Bridge, walked over, went through customs. No problems going through customs to get in the United States. They knew we were coming. And we had a picnic in a park right on the other side of the Peace Bridge. And then we went back. And that made some headlines, too. But that's the sign of support that we had. That's the Gwen Jacobs story. And she was put herself on the line like the women in Rochester did. That's kind of my history. I've always been kind of an organizer and always stuck up for values. I mean, that's one of the things I'm proudest of, is everything I've done has always been for values that I cared about. I've never done anything violent or anything to hurt anyone else or anything like that. The civil disobedience has all been in the spirit of Martin Luther King or Gandhi or, that tradition.
Let's talk about Sunsport.
Okay.
I know, it existed for some years before you
Sunsport started in 1965. Before I even had Woodstock in 1969. So I didn't know anything about it. It was founded by a guy named Hugo Forster, who had moved here from Germany, flew over it in a helicopter or something. He said, that's the spot. Back then, it was so rural here. The major roads around here were all dirt. So anyway, that's their history. I had visited maybe 60 different nudist parks and beaches all over the country. The East Coast, the West Coast, Southern one. But after visiting all of those, visited Sunsport more than any other club with my family. Sunsport was such a beautiful place, natural, a lot of acreage, 40 acres, which is a lot for Florida. And I like the people, so we really started visiting Sunsport a lot. I was teaching school, so I visit during school vacations and the summer, and we travel a lot. Hugo Forster, who founded it, died in 2000, and they were looking for someone to replace it. he had a non-functioning board, but they did function after he died. And his son, not his son, his nephew, who owned it, didn't want anything to do with it. So this board was going to sell it, and the money was going to Hugo's nephew, which was appropriate. Luckily, it wasn't being turned into a KOA or anything. So we wanted to keep it. There were several bidders, but they knew me because I'd been visiting Sunsport. And I put together a group of people, and we put a bid in. So we bought it, and that's how I got into Sunsport as far as reowning it. Then we did some major things at Sunsport that I'm very proud of. Hugo, the owner, was a chain smoker and a chain drinker. If you walked into the office at Sunsport, which is now in a building that we call the clubhouse, you'd walk through smoke to get to the office. So the first thing we did was say no smoking in any of the buildings, which was kind of radical at that. And we put in a board that supported strongly our ecology. In the early days, Nature Society was looking for a place for midwinter gathering, and they picked here. We've kept it going. Now, Sunsport has a Midwinter Naturist Festival. I think we're in our 37th year now. It's the longest running non-sports event anywhere in the naturist world. It started as a Nature Society event and morphed somehow into just Sunsport doing it. But Nature Society has always supported it.
I'm curious about these kids camps.
I was a school teacher and always worked with kids, so I loved the opportunity. And we have a lot of the regular camp activities, lots of arts and crafts, sports, all kind of good stuff like that. And we put on a variety show the last day of camp. And it's a lot of fun. So the camp is a wonderful experience. So that's the camp.
Sure.
It's been around a long time. The festival's a long time. But we've been the leader in naturist resorts in the United States. And we still are, I think. 2 years ago, the very first day of camp, some people from Department of Children and Families, it's called DCF, with sheriffs, with deputy sheriffs, came out here. It was kind of scary. They said, "How come you're running a camp?" In Florida, everybody involved with the children's camp or anyone around is supposed to have level 2 screening, which means fingerprinting and all kind of background checks. Now, we can't do that with every person who's at Sunsport. Ask every person, every parent. We had parents coming from British Columbia, from Canada. We had parents coming from Texas. We can't say, well, before you come, we're going to have to fingerprint you when you walk in. It was crazy. And I knew that it didn't apply to us because when the state made that rule a few years ago, they'd had a meeting in West Palm downtown. I went to it and extraorded our camp said, well, it doesn't apply to you because parents are there. You're not a day camp, you're not a sleepover camp, you're a family camp. So I knew we were unsafe. I knew we didn't have to do all that screening. I mean, we do our own screening, and we always do criminal background checks on everybody. So we take those kind of precautions all the time here. Basically, they said, well, you're going to have to fill out these forms. You get the forms from Tallahassee. I said, go to a call. Tallahassee is the state capital of Florida, and DCF up there completely supported us. They undercut the law. You have every right to do it. You're a family camp. I was talking with Eric Schutoff, who's the executive director of ANR, and he's an attorney, and I kept him in touch with what was going on. And we agreed we're going to change the name to, instead of calling it Family Youth Camp, we're going to call it Family Youth Gathering. Still the same thing, it's still a camp. Anyway, we haven't had any trouble from the local authorities since, but it was kind of scary. I mean, the DCF was interviewing parents, interviewing kids. It was not a pleasant time, that way to start the camp out. But that was 1 year, and it's gone, and we won, and I knew we would. Well, other people were a lot more scared than I was. But you know my history. I've been through a lot of stuff, and I try and avoid stress and take things easy and calm.
What is your relationship like with the town you're in, Loxahatchee Grove?
Loxahatchee Grove, the town we're in, was incorporated about 12 years ago now. The very first candidates the first year had a candidates forum. We invited them to come here. And 9 of the 10 candidates came. 1 refused to come. I moderated it. And the candidates were dressed. I was nude in the middle of them. About half the people here were nude, half were dressed from the town. And we had this candidates forum. It made big news, national news on television. Stations in Japan covered it, of this candidates forum at a nudist resort. And that was kind of fun. We've always been on very good terms with the town we're in, and we helped found it. And we're the densest population in the whole town right here.
I want to ask about the future of Sunsport. What's going to happen after you retire or expire?
I'm really proud of Sunsport and what we've done and the direction we're going. We're a very unique club. I don't think there's any other resort like it in the country. Our shareholders all have the values. It will be protected because we have shareholders who all agree the same thing. We are not allowed to have our children inherit shares. We can't sell our shares without unanimous approval of the other shareholders. And we all agree on the values. Because I'm 82, I put most of my shares in joint shareholding with the other shareholders. So there's no question about Sunsport continuing the way it is with the same values. And that's another very important thing I care about, is that Sunsport is protected. It's not going to ever go the way of so many other clubs that the owners die, retire, sell out, whatever, and they disappear. There are too many clubs like that's happened.
You have shareholders. You're obviously all owners. It's not exactly a co-op. How does that work?
No, it's not a co-op, and I've seen co-ops. Very often you get a lot of politics in co-ops, particularly if they're big clubs. They're all the time having political bickering, and you never know what the rules are going to be the next year. We are based on values, and frankly, we didn't want our members voting and deciding whether there's be a smoking area or not. So the shareholders have these values, and we thought about co-op and decided, no, we're not going to do a co-op. We can protect ourselves just as well or better by having a very small group of shareholders who share values and are on the same page, want the same thing. That's another way to protect a club. The key is, and it's so important, you can't sell your shares. You can't give your shares to your children. You have to have agreement by all the other shareholders before anyone else comes on as a shareholder. And you need experience with them and make sure their values are the same. I've held the most shares, but I've made my shares joint with other people, so I don't hold them exclusively. But I've never used majority shareholders to decide anything. We make much better decisions when we do it by consensus. I'm president of our board, but I've been outvoted. And I'm glad I have, because the decisions made when I was outvoted were better than what I was saying. So you can't have too much ego into it. I mean, I have a lot of ego. I'm very happy with myself. I'm very proud of myself. But you can't let that interfere, or I don't want to let it interfere, with how the club is organized or governed. I'm not planning to go any soon. I'm very healthy. I'm about the only 82-year-old person I know who never gets a headache, never gets a backache, don't have any prescription medicines, blood pressure normal, no sign of diabetes. I'm pescatarian. I don't eat meat except fish. I get exercise every day. I swim laps of the pool for a little over half an hour every day. And I avoid stress. Even in stressful situations, I'm pretty good at avoiding stress. But if I died tomorrow, I'd be very happy with the life I've had, with everything I've accomplished and what I've done and the positive changes I've made in the world. So I feel very good about that.
It's hard to pinpoint a single most memorable achievement for Morley Schloss. Whether it's giving a speech, building a pool, or fighting for equality, Morley has approached each new endeavor as someone to roll up his sleeves, sometimes literally and sometimes only symbolically, and plunge into the work head-on. This gumption has resulted in a wildly varying and rich story of a man whose actions consistently resonate within and affect the culture around him. In doing so, Morley proves that sometimes the best way to make a difference is simply to start. I want to acknowledge, as Morley did, that there are many other figures in these stories who should not be overshadowed, particularly the 7 women who were arrested and fought the good fight for years before winning the right for all women to go top-free in New York. In this episode, I set out to tell Morley's story in his own words. His story overlaps with the story of the Rochester Top-Free 7, but it was not my focus to tell the comprehensive history of that legal battle. or any of the other stories told. Obviously, a whole other film or documentary could be made to tell the story of the Rochester Topfree 7. And such a story should rightfully focus on the women who boldly put their bodies and rights on the line to fight for their values of freedom and equality. I really hope someone makes that documentary. I would love to watch it. As a final note, I'm releasing this episode of Naked Age on June 21st, which is the very same day, 38 years ago, that the Rochester Topfree 7 were first arrested. This episode would not have been possible without the help of Nathan and Sarah Sizemore, Martin Novoa, and Morley Schloss. Special thanks to Shannon Lewis, Timothy Sargent, and Stefan Deshane, who, as you might guess, has already interviewed Morley before for his podcast, The Naturist Living Show. I'll include a link to that episode in the show notes. This episode of Naked Age included music licensed and sourced from Envato Elements. The theme song was composed by me. If you enjoy Naked Age, please head over to your podcast platform of choice and leave us a rating and review. Your testimonials help us attract new listeners. If you find value in our work, I encourage you to join our community newsletter, Planet Nude. Planet Nude is a free daily newsletter, but for just $6 a month or $60 a year, you can support the research and content that goes into the newsletter, as well as this podcast. Subscribe at www.planetnude.co. Finally, if you appreciate this podcast and you follow me or my work on other platforms, please reach out. Send me a message or at me or email me at evan@planetnude.co. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to Naked Age. Until next time.